Alright, welcome back. We're going to cover Unit 5.04. We're going to cover the last portion, which is the randomizing a number. And so if you look in your notes in your PowerPoint, you'll find this is the last part. We're going to talk about creating a random number generator, which we can then use to create random numbers with. And you might be asking yourself, what's the purpose of this? Why would we want to create random numbers in the first place? A lot of games and a lot of things in programming come down to random number generators. So let me give you an example of where you might see a random number generator. Take the game Solitaire on the computer. There's a deck of cards, and whenever the user plays the game will spit out a random card every time. And that's using a random number generator. Any kind of card game tends to use a random number generator because the cards represent a particular number. So the cards kind of represent a number, and therefore that random number needs to be randomly generated. You can also think about this when you play games like RPGs. The game will randomly generate an event, or it'll randomly generate an enemy for you to fight in some way, shape, and form. So random number generators are extremely important. And we'll kind of go through this kind of briefly to kind of show you what they look like in some coding. So here I have a form, and here I want to be able to click the button and display the different random numbers within the button. So if I go to my form, the first thing we have to do to create a random number generator is we have to declare the generator. So if you look in your notes, this would be about slide 37 in the notes, where we have to declare a random number generator. So for example, what I would do is I'll say something like dim, that we declare our variables. You would then call your random number generator whatever you want. I'm going to call it gen for right now. You can call it random number, RNG, whatever. All right, as new system.random open close parentheses. All right, this is taken straight from your notes. All right, so I've taken this straight out of your notes, and you can see this on, again, slide 37. And the key here is that this is my random number generator. This is not a variable. It looks like a variable. You can see here we have our name, and we have the dim and the as. It looks very similar to a variable that we declare normally, but this is not a variable. That's very important. You have to remember, a random number generator, this gen right here, this is not a variable. This is a generator. And what the generator is going to do is it's going to help us create numbers. So the key to remember here is that this generator cannot be a variable. You can't take inputs for it, you can't output it, you can't add it, you can't subtract it. All right? This is a number generator. You have to understand that to understand random number generators. Now, let's write a comment saying this will declare a random number generator called gen. All right. Again, just writing some comments to kind of help me understand what I'm doing in the coding. Another note you might want to make note of is that you only need one generator. You don't need two generators. Only one generator per program or per form. All right. Now we also need to declare 4 variables, because even though this is my generator, the numbers have to go somewhere. So again, this generator is going to generate some random numbers, but the numbers have to go somewhere. You can't just have a random generator by itself. So what you do is you put the generator numbers into a variable. So we'll just go and declare 4 variables. Num1 as, we'll call these integers for right now, that's fine. Dim num2, this one we'll call this a double, and you'll kind of see why in a second. Num3 as integer, and then finally dim num4 as integer. All right, and all I'm doing here, and I'll write some comments here, declaring 4 variables for my random numbers. All right, now again, here I've declared everything, but now I need to use my variables in conjunction with my random number generator. If we go back to the program, what I want to do is I want to be able to click this button and generate 4 different types of random numbers. If you look back in your notes, you'll realize that there are 4 different types on slide 38 and slide 39. There's the next double, and then the next with a parentheses, and another one that sets a limit. We'll talk about all those in just a second. So the first thing we have to do is we have to set all of these numbers equal to the random number generator. What does this look like? Well, according to your notes, if we kind of look back at it, you'll see that it's your variable is equal to the name of your generator. What was the name of our generator? It was gen. You can see that right above. Equals gen.next. All right? And so what this is going to do is this is going to create a random number between 1 and 2,147,000,000, so such and such. And it creates a really, really big whole number. All right, so this will create a big whole number. All right, not just a big whole number, a random big whole number. All right, because remember, it's a random number generator. Again, notice the syntax here. Variable is equal to the generator dot next. All right, and let's do the next one. So num2, we'll set this one equal to gen dot next double. Again, you'll see this on slide 38. And then what this is going to do is this will create a, not a large, but a small random number below 1. Like between 1 and 0. And again, once I put this in a label, you should see this pretty clearly. And then we'll do the other two. Num3 is equal to gen.next. This time I want to use the parentheses that we see in the notes on 39. What the parentheses means, if we put one number, let's say we put the number 30 in there. Actually, that's too big. Let's go with number 10. You'll kind of see this easier. What this means is that this 10 in here is the max value. The program will never generate the number 10. But the program will generate everything from 0 up to the number 10. Alright, so that's very key. It will generate everything from 0 up to 10, meaning 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But it will never get to 10. So a comment here I want to write is this will create a random number between 0 and 9. So it's going to go up to 9, but it will never get to 10. And then finally, I will say num4 is equal to gen.next. This time I'm going to go 1, comma 21. Now what does this comma do? This comma sets a lower and an upper limit. So the lower limit is 1, and the upper limit is 21. And so what this means is that I'm going to create a random number between 1 and 21, but I'm never going to include 21. In other words, 21 will never show up in my random number generator. So let's say I'm creating a bunch of numbers, and then I want to create a number between 1 and 20. I have to go to 21, 1 to 21. You could also set the bottom limit. Let's say I want to go from 5 to 20 for some reason, and I could set the bottom number to 5. We'll set this to 5 to kind of show the examples. And we'll say this will create a random number between 5 and 20. Again, it will never reach the upper limit. That's very important. You have to remember this. The upper limit will never be generated. You have to remember that with random number generators. If you don't, you're going to end up creating numbers that don't actually exist, or you might miss out on numbers that you need to actually use in your program. All right, so let's display all this in some labels. We'll say label1.text is equal to num1. All right, again, you can see here, what I'm doing now is I'm just outputting all of the numbers I had earlier. But notice I have to output them from their variables. I cannot output them from my generator. And I mean, you could, but the reason you don't want to do that is because you want the variable, since it holds the value, to be that which is spitting out the number. Because you might want to use these numbers later. Maybe you want to use them in the program as a game or as part of creating a stat system or something like that. So you want to keep them in a variable. All right, so let's run it and let's kind of see what this looks like. So here I have my random number generator, and then if I click on my generator, this button right here, again, following just my coding and my logic, you should see that I'm going to create a random number for num1, num2, num3, and num4, but it's going to be within these parameters. So let's take a look. All right, fantastic. So the first one, you can see we have num1 equals num.gen. Remember, this will create a big random number between 0 and up to the 2 billion whatever number. You can see here, very big number between 1 and 2 billion. All right, the next one is num2 equals gen.next double. Again, you can see here, I'm creating a random number between 0 and 1. All right, and again, you can see that just straight from your notes. Finally, if we look at the third one, we see gen.next 10, meaning we'll create a number between 0 to 10. And here you can see 7 is obviously between 0 and 10, but doesn't include 10. And then finally, you can see here we have one between the 5 and 20 for our final number. All right. Now, if I click on the button over and over and over again, pay attention to the numbers down here. I want you to see that these numbers will never go above or below their limits that I've set. So each of these next double, next open close parentheses, next comma parentheses or whatever, these all set a limit. They kind of set a limit on what the computer can generate. All right, and as I'm going through this, just kind of pay attention to the numbers. Notice how they stay within those limits. All right. Now let's say I want to do something like a dice roll, just for sake of example. Let's say I want to do a dice roll. We'll do this kind of quickly since we need to finish up this lesson. So let's say I want to have a dice roll, and I want to put the 2 dice rolls in label 5 and label 6, and then I want to have a total dice roll. Think like as if you're playing Monopoly, or if you're playing Risk, or something like that. And so now what I need is I need 2 extra variables. So I'll call it dim dice 1 as integer, dim dice 2 as integer, and then I also need one more because I need to add the 2 dice together, dice total as integer. All right. And so again, this is just an example of how to do a dice roll variables in a computer program using a random number generator. I want to do whenever I click the button, I'm going to generate 2 different dice rolls. Now, a dice roll is between what 2 numbers? 1 and 6. So when you roll dice, you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as the possible options. And so what that means is we have to set them within random number generator. So dice1 is going to be equal to gen.next. All right, is that going to work? Probably not. Remember, we have to set the limits between 1 and up to 6. So we need a parentheses, 1, comma, is it 6? Will this work? This is a question you should be asking yourself whenever you make this. And what you should hopefully come to the conclusion is this will not work. And the reason this will not work is because the upper limit is 6. And remember, the upper limit will never be generated. But however, in a dice roll, we have to generate a 6. So this means that this needs to be 1 to 7. And then for the second one, we also need to say gen.next, again, same thing, 1, comma, 7. All right? And then finally, we'll just simply add the 2 dice together. And this will give us whatever is generated between these 2 different dice rolls. All right? Another thing to notice is that you can use the same generator twice. You can see that right there. All right? And then notice how I have 2 dice. You might be wondering, couldn't I just do something like this? Dice total is equal to gen.next, let's say 2 to 12. Doesn't that work, Mr. Wu? Or 2 to 13? Doesn't that work? And I'll say no. The reason this doesn't work, that this line of code right here does not work, is because the probabilities change. When you have 2 dice, the probabilities are significantly different than generating a random number from 2 to 12. So you have to keep that in mind. The probabilities do change, and they will affect the way you roll dice. So you have to actually put dice 1, dice 2. All right? So now that we have our dice made, let's put them in our labels. So this was label 5, and we'll say label 5.text is equal to dice 1. Label 6, I believe, .text is equal to dice 2. And then finally, label 7.text is equal to the total dice, or dice total. Okay? And let's run it, and we'll kind of see what happens this time. So this time I want you to pay attention to this part right here. All right, so this part of the form. So let me click on my generator. I want you to see now I'm creating 2 dice between 1 and 6. 3 and 5 make 8. 4 and 2 make 6. 4 and 2 make 6 again. 4 and 2 make 6 again. All right. 6 and 5 make 11. All right. 1 and 4 make 5. Again, notice how these are different numbers, but they're within the 1 to 6 range. And then I'm adding them up and displaying my variable here. All right. Hopefully that was a helpful lesson or a helpful reminder of how to use a random number generator. Again, you will be using these on your next project. So kind of pay close attention to the fact that a generator is not a variable, and you have to set it equal to a variable. And then, of course, remember that the upper limit of your next, the net is never generated. So this 21 will never be generated. That's another very important rule to remember.